You always wake up at 3 a.m., and somehow it feels like this has been happening for a while now. Not once, not twice, but in a pattern your body seems to recognize. And even before you fully open your eyes, something already feels off. Because your body is clearly exhausted from the day before, but your brain doesn't seem to follow that same logic. It turns on as if the night has just begun. Your thoughts start moving faster than they should at that hour. Your mind begins jumping from one idea to another without control. And there's this subtle sense of alertness you can't fully explain. It's not panic, and it's not exactly stress either. It's something quieter, but much more persistent, like your brain is refusing to fully let go. And no matter how still your body stays, your mind keeps going. You try to relax, to slow things down, to fall back asleep, but the more you notice it, the more awake you seem to become. And that's the part that doesn't make sense to most people, because if this were just insomnia, your brain wouldn't feel this active. It wouldn't feel like something is deliberately keeping you up, almost like there's a hidden mechanism running in the background. And what that mechanism is where things start to shift. I'm Dr. Sarah, a sleep medicine specialist with a background in psychiatry, and for years I've studied what really happens inside the brain at night. Not just how people fall asleep, but why they wake up and can't return, especially in those who feel like their sleep suddenly changed after a certain age. People who were once good sleepers but now feel stuck in a pattern that doesn't seem random and doesn't feel accidental, a pattern that quietly repeats itself night after night. And over time, I started noticing something very specific. Many of these individuals were not struggling to fall asleep initially. They could go to bed and drift off without much resistance, but a few hours later, something would interrupt that process, almost like a switch being flipped somewhere in the brain. And once that switch was activated, everything changed. Sleep stopped feeling natural and started feeling unstable. They would wake up around the same window every night, often around 3 a.m., sometimes slightly before or after. And from that moment, their brain wouldn't fully shut off again. Even if their body felt heavy and tired, their mind stayed active. Thoughts would begin, awareness would increase, and sleep would fade, leaving them in a strange state between rest and alertness, a state that feels familiar but never fully understood. Many of them tried to explain it as stress or anxiety. Others believed it was simply part of getting older. Some thought their sleep quality was permanently damaged, and most of them started blaming themselves over time, thinking they were doing something wrong without realizing it. But what I found was something very different from those assumptions, something that doesn't start with behavior, but with biology. Because when you look closely at what the brain is doing in that moment, you start to see that this isn't random wakefulness, and it's not simply a lack of sleep ability. There is a specific pattern happening beneath the surface, a pattern that explains why the brain becomes alert at the wrong time, and why it becomes so difficult to return to sleep afterward. A pattern most people have never been shown before. And once you begin to understand what's actually driving that pattern, the entire experience starts to make a different kind of sense, not in a vague or emotional way, but in a very precise one. Because the brain is not just waking you up without a reason, it's responding to something it believes is important, something that changes how it behaves in the middle of the night. And that's where the real explanation begins to unfold. Most people assume this happens because of stress, or they believe it's anxiety slowly building up at night. Some even accept it as a normal part of getting older. And over time, those explanations start to feel convincing. because they are repeated so often they begin to sound like truth. But there's a detail most people never stop to question, a detail that doesn't fully fit any of those explanations. Because stress alone doesn't explain precise timing, anxiety doesn't usually activate at the exact same hour every night, and aging doesn't suddenly switch your brain on at 3 a.m. There's something much more specific happening beneath the surface, something that follows a pattern your body recognizes, a pattern that repeats with almost mechanical consistency. And that consistency points to something deeper than emotion. Why does your brain activate exactly when your body needs deep sleep the most, right at the point where restoration should be at its peak, right when your system is supposed to be at its most stable? Instead of going deeper, your brain suddenly becomes lighter, more aware, more active than it should be. That shift is not random and it's not accidental. It's a signal that something else is controlling the process. Because if this were just insomnia, the pattern would look different. You would struggle more at the beginning of the night. Your brain would resist sleep from the start. But that's not what happens in this case. You fall asleep, sometimes without much difficulty at all, and only later does something interrupt that state. Something that changes how your brain behaves mid-sleep. Instead of slowing down, your brain speeds up. Instead of disconnecting, it becomes more aware. Instead of staying asleep, it pulls you back into wakefulness. And that reversal is what makes this pattern so confusing, because it goes against what people expect insomnia to feel like. It behaves in the opposite way most explanations suggest, and that's why so many people misunderstand what's happening. So the real question is not whether you can sleep. The real question is what is interrupting that sleep cycle, what is shifting your brain into alert mode at the wrong time, what is triggering this activation in the middle of the night, and more importantly, why does your brain allow it to happen? Because once you start looking in that direction, you begin to uncover a mechanism most people have never heard of. Sleep science has identified a very specific state behind this pattern, a state that doesn't appear on the surface in an obvious way, but quietly changes how your brain behaves during the night. It doesn't look like traditional insomnia at first glance, and that's exactly why it often goes unnoticed, because the symptoms feel familiar, but the cause is different. And that difference changes everything about how it should be approached. This state is known as the neural sleep inhibition response, not a condition most people hear about in everyday conversations, but something increasingly recognized in modern sleep research. It describes what happens when the brain limits deep sleep access, even when the body is physically ready to rest, even when you feel completely exhausted before going to bed, and even when nothing seems obviously wrong. When this response becomes active, something shifts internally. The brain stops allowing full depth of sleep to occur, not completely waking you up right away, but preventing you from staying fully asleep, keeping your system in a lighter and more fragile state, where sleep can be interrupted much more easily, and where recovery never fully completes. This is not because your body has lost the ability to sleep, and it's not because your mind is simply overthinking. It's a controlled response coming from the brain itself, a response designed to prioritize awareness over restoration, even if that awareness is not something you consciously feel. Even if there is no real danger present in your environment, your brain behaves as if there is something to monitor. And in that state, deep sleep becomes restricted, not removed entirely, but limited in depth and duration, which is why you may fall asleep without difficulty at first, but struggle to maintain that state as the night progresses, especially during critical phases of the sleep cycle, where the brain is supposed to go into its deepest restoration, but instead begins to shift back toward alertness. The problem is that most people never recognize this pattern. They assume it's something simple or already understood, so they try to fix it with surface-level solutions, changing routines, forcing relaxation, adjusting habits. But those approaches don't address this internal response because they don't reach the mechanism controlling the interruption, and that's where the next piece starts to become clearer. Here's what's actually happening inside your body at night. Your brain is designed to follow a very specific sequence, a sequence that moves you from alertness into deep restoration. At a certain point, it begins shutting down external awareness, reducing sensitivity to thoughts, sounds, and internal signals, and gradually activating what researchers call the sleep switch, a natural transition that allows deep sleep to fully take over. In a normal state, this process happens without effort. Your brain lowers alert signals and increases recovery signals. Melatonin rises, cortisol stays low, and the nervous system calms. Everything moves in a coordinated rhythm that supports deep sleep. And once that state is reached, your brain maintains it, keeping you asleep through the most restorative hours of the night without interruptions or sudden awakenings. But when the neural sleep inhibition response is triggered, this entire sequence becomes unstable. The brain does not fully shut down alert signaling. Instead, it keeps part of its awareness system active, not enough to fully wake you at first, but enough to prevent deep sleep from stabilizing. And that subtle difference changes everything. This is what we refer to as brain alert mode, a state where your brain remains partially active at night, monitoring internal and external signals more than it should, keeping your system slightly elevated instead of fully relaxed, even when your body feels heavy and ready for sleep. Even when you've done everything right before bed, your brain is still holding on to a level of vigilance. And because of that, your sleep becomes lighter over time, more sensitive to small internal changes in the body, more reactive to shifts in hormones or nervous system activity. So instead of going deeper into sleep, you hover near the surface, where it becomes much easier for your brain to wake you, especially during specific moments in the sleep cycle, moments when your system is more vulnerable to interruption. And that's exactly why the pattern feels so consistent. You wake up at 3 a.m. with your mind suddenly active. Your thoughts begin moving, even if you were deeply asleep before. Your body stays tired, but your brain feels switched on. And no matter how much you try to relax, it doesn't fully shut off, because the system controlling that state is still active. And what actually triggers that response in the first place is where things begin to go even deeper. For many people, this pattern becomes more noticeable over time, and it tends to appear more clearly after the age of 40, not as a sudden problem, but as a gradual shift in how sleep feels. Something that used to be automatic now feels inconsistent. Something that used to be deep now feels lighter and fragmented. And even though nothing obvious has changed externally, your nights start to behave differently from before. One of the key reasons for this involves cortisol, a hormone deeply connected to alertness and survival signaling. Under normal conditions, cortisol should stay low during the night, only rising again as your body prepares to wake in the morning. But when this rhythm becomes slightly unstable, even small increases can be detected by the brain, especially during sensitive phases of the sleep cycle. At the same time, your circadian rhythm plays a critical role. This internal clock coordinates when your body sleeps and wakes. It regulates temperature, hormones, and neural activity overnight. But with age, this timing can become more delicate, more sensitive to disruptions that once had no effect, which means your brain becomes more reactive to subtle shifts, even shifts you are not consciously aware of. The nervous system also becomes more responsive over time, particularly in how it balances rest and alertness signals. Small internal changes can create disproportionate reactions, where the brain interprets minor variations as meaningful, not as danger in a conscious sense, but as something that requires attention on a biological level, and that interpretation changes how sleep is maintained. This means that even subtle internal signals can trigger alertness, a slight cortisol fluctuation, a rhythm misalignment, a neural shift. Things that would normally pass unnoticed during sleep now become enough to activate a response designed to increase awareness rather than rest. Even if your environment is completely safe and quiet, even if your mind feels calm before going to bed. And when that internal alert signal is detected, the neural sleep inhibition response activates automatically, not because you chose it and not because you felt anxious, but because your brain is responding on a biological level, which explains why you can feel calm and still stay awake, why your body feels tired but your mind won't shut off. And what actually triggers that response in the first place is where things begin to go even deeper. Imagine your brain like a night security system, not something you consciously control, but something always running, constantly scanning for signals, patterns, and internal changes, deciding when it's safe to fully shut down for the night. And when everything feels safe inside your system, the process is smooth. Alert signals power down gradually and consistently, your breathing slows, your muscles relax, your mind quiets. Deep sleep phases become longer and more stable. Your body moves into repair, recovery, and restoration. And your brain allows that state to continue uninterrupted because there is nothing signaling a need for vigilance. But when something feels slightly off internally, the response changes, even if you are not consciously aware of it happening, even if there is no visible or external reason for concern. Your brain detects a subtle shift somewhere in the system, and instead of fully powering down, it hesitates, keeping part of its alert system quietly active, just enough to monitor what it believes might matter. In that state, the system never fully disengages. It doesn't trigger a loud or obvious alarm response at first, but instead, the alert remains low, constant, and persistent, running silently in the background of your sleep, preventing your brain from going fully offline and limiting how deep your sleep can actually become. That's why you don't sleep through the night consistently. That's why your brain feels active when you wake up at 3 a.m., and that's why your thoughts begin moving almost immediately. And that's why your body never feels completely restored, because the system responsible for shutting things down never fully does. It stays partially engaged, even when you need rest the most. And that subtle activation is enough to change everything. Most people try to fix this by focusing on surface-level habits. They adjust routines, reduce screen time, or try to relax more. But those changes don't address the internal signal being detected. They don't influence the system that is staying active at night, which is why the pattern continues despite their efforts. Because until that signal is understood and regulated, the brain will continue responding in the same way for a reason most people haven't uncovered yet. Over time, this doesn't just happen once in a while. It begins to form a pattern your body starts to recognize. Night after night, the same interruption quietly repeats itself. Sleep becomes less predictable and less restorative. And even when you spend enough hours in bed, it doesn't feel like true rest anymore. It feels incomplete, like something is missing. This is where fragmented sleep starts to take shape. You may not remember every time you wake up, but your brain cycles in and out of lighter states, interrupting the deeper phases your body depends on. So even when you think you slept through the night, your system knows it didn't fully recover, and that difference builds up over time. During the day, this begins to show in subtle ways, a constant sense of mental fatigue that doesn't fully go away, moments where focus becomes harder than it used to be, a slight heaviness behind your thoughts and reactions, energy that feels unstable instead of consistent, and that quiet feeling of never being fully restored, even after what should have been a full night of sleep. And the frustrating part is how much effort you put in. You try going to bed earlier, hoping it will make a difference. You attempt to relax more before sleep, reducing stimulation. You adjust routines, habits, and even your environment. You do everything that normally should help, everything that people recommend when sleep is off, but the outcome doesn't seem to change in a meaningful way. Because the cycle is not being driven by those surface factors, it continues because something deeper remains active, something that keeps signaling your brain to stay alert, even when you've done everything correctly on the outside. So the pattern repeats, night after night without clear resolution, and over time, that creates a quiet sense of frustration, a feeling that something isn't being fully understood. Which leads to a deeper question most people eventually reach. What if sleep isn't the part that's actually broken? What if the issue is how your brain is interpreting the night? And what would change if that interpretation shifted? If your brain no longer felt the need to stay partially alert, if it could fully release that underlying signal and finally allow you to stay asleep all the way through the night? The goal is not to force your body to sleep, and it's not about shutting your brain down artificially, because that approach doesn't resolve the underlying pattern. Instead, it often masks what is actually happening beneath the surface. What truly matters is how your brain perceives the night and whether it feels safe enough to fully let go. That is where the real shift begins to take place. The focus is on gently reducing the neural sleep inhibition response, not eliminating it aggressively, but helping it settle naturally, allowing the brain to lower its internal level of alertness so it no longer feels the need to stay partially active. This creates the conditions for deeper sleep to emerge again, without forcing the process or overriding your biology, but by working in alignment with how your system is designed. At the same time, certain internal systems need support, the ones that regulate how your body transitions into sleep, including melatonin, which signals the body to rest, cortisol, which must remain stable during the night, and the nervous system, which controls overall balance. When these systems are aligned, the brain responds differently. It begins to release the need for constant vigilance. As these signals stabilize, something important happens. The brain gradually exits what we call brain alert mode, not instantly, but in a progressive and natural way, allowing deeper stages of sleep to return more consistently, and making it easier to stay asleep once you are there. Without that sudden activation in the middle of the night, without that familiar 3 a.m. interruption pattern. This is why some people choose to support this process directly, using specific nighttime nutrients and targeted compounds, substances that are known to work with these biological signals, helping regulate what the brain depends on during sleep, without creating dependency or forcing sedation, but instead supporting the system in a controlled way, one that respects how sleep is supposed to happen naturally. If you're curious about what that kind of support looks like, there is a specific approach many people have been exploring, one that focuses on stabilizing these exact nighttime signals in a way that aligns with how the brain regulates sleep. You can find more details about it in the first pinned comment below. But before that fully makes sense, there's one final piece about why this pattern happens at a specific time that most people have never considered. So if you've been waking up at 3 a.m. night after night, what you're experiencing may not be insomnia in the way you've been told. It may not be a failure to sleep or a lack of discipline, and it may not be something you caused without realizing it. Because the pattern you're going through follows a different logic, one that isn't based on willpower or habits alone, but on how your brain is responding during the night. It may simply be your brain entering a neural sleep inhibition response, a state where it holds on to alertness longer than it should, not to harm you, but to protect you at a biological level, even if that protection is no longer necessary, even if there is no real danger present anymore. Your brain continues to follow that programmed response, and that is what keeps interrupting your sleep cycle. When the right signals begin to return to balance, your brain no longer feels the need to stay partially active. It starts to release that internal sense of vigilance, allowing deeper sleep to happen more naturally, not forced, not suppressed, but restored. And that changes how your nights begin to feel, from fragmented and unstable to continuous and restorative. This is when your body can finally do what it was designed for, to move through full sleep cycles without interruption, to repair, recover, and restore energy properly, to wake up without that heavy, unfinished feeling, and to experience what it's like to truly sleep through the night, not occasionally, but consistently over time, as the system stabilizes in a natural way. But there is one detail that makes this pattern even more precise, something most people overlook completely. Why this activation tends to happen around the same time each night, why 3 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. becomes such a common window, and what that reveals about how your cortisol rhythm behaves. Because that timing is not random or coincidental. It follows a biological pattern that can be understood. In the next video, I'll break down exactly why this happens, why your brain shifts into alert mode at that specific hour, and how that connects directly to your internal clock. Once you see how that timing works, everything changes, because it reveals a layer of your sleep most people never see. And once you understand that layer, you start to see your entire sleep pattern in a completely different way.